Hi, history friends. Welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart is writing. And I know there's so many great YouTube channels that talk about writing, so I'm not going to get into any of that stuff. But I wanted to share my story about how I published my book, World War II historical fiction called The War Between Us, because I've had a lot of people ask me how I did it and express amazement, like I'm Superwoman or something, but I'm not, I promise. I am mostly disorganized and a little chaotic and homeschooling mom and lots of other responsibilities, and then keeping up on my history blog, writing. So if I can write a book, I know, you can too if that's your aspiration. And so I wanted to share my story just in the hopes that it can help someone else who thinks, wow, this is really daunting. I could never write a book. But you can. Anybody can. So I wrote my book in 9 months, the first draft, and then I rewrote the second draft and did the editing in 3 months and then published. So it took a year. And my book is historical fiction, and that takes twice as long to write and do research than other books like set in modern day. My book was also really unique in that it's about a Korean American during World War II and his experience with prejudice in the Midwest. And it is a love story as well. So it's set in my home state of Indiana. And so that's a place that I felt comfortable writing from because it's where I grew up. But when it came to the Korean American aspect, wow, I did not anticipate how hard it would be to do the research for this book. And I will talk about that in a little bit. But first, the process of what I went through is, first thing was I wrote when I could. This included my husband. He watched the kids like 2 nights a week in the evening, so I could go out and to the library and write. And this is something we talked about as a family, that this was mom's homework, and it's something that I needed to do. And I was really grateful for my husband and his support in making sure that it happened, even on some nights when I didn't feel like going. He said, go, and get to the library. I'll take care of everything at home. So that was a huge relief to have that resource of time available. And I got a lot of work done at the library. I just wish they'd stayed open 1 hour later. Oh well, but it happened. So the library is a really great place for me to write. And other times I had to lock myself in my room so I could focus and not have distractions. And then the rest of the time of writing was just odd bits throughout the day, throughout the weeks and months. And it's just whenever I could fit it in, and that fit with our homeschooling schedule and the kids' needs and making dinner and doing laundry and all that stuff. The great thing about homeschooling was it was flexible. So some days when I just felt like really good about writing, that I could get a lot done, the kids had the day to work on their own projects or play games and like board games and stuff, and that worked really well for us. And then the days that I didn't get a lot of writing done were great school days. So it just worked with our schedule, and that's just how it happened little by little over time. And the next thing that I did was that I wanted to talk about was that my research was a process. So I'd say that my research took about 3 years, maybe 4, if you count the year of writing. And first, I had to find a resource that talked about Korean Americans during World War II. This was extremely challenging because it's not a topic that's really written about. Even in books I bought about Korean Americans, there were teeny tiny chapters or even little mentions of them during the war. This was really frustrating, and my book was hinging on being able to find something, and I did finally find a doctoral thesis that a woman wrote about Korean Americans in World War II, and this was such a lifesaver. So I was able to buy a copy of the doctoral thesis and research through that, and that was fantastic. So the other things was I spent 2 years watching Korean dramas, and this might not sound like a thing, but and I wouldn't normally recommend watching TV to do historical research, but when it came to understanding a culture, I felt like watching the TV was a great thing. So I didn't necessarily go into watching Korean dramas for my book. I just watched them because I enjoy them. But over 2 years, I really came to understand and get a really good feel for the society and their culture, the food. And because the food always looks so amazing, I cooked a lot of different Korean recipes. So the ones that I talk about in my book are ones that I made myself, including the kimchi. And that was really helpful to have that base to come from when writing my character Alex, the Korean American. Another research that I had to do was the ration cooking. My character does ration cooking in my cookbook. And I had done my ration recipe challenge in 2014. And this was a really hands-on way of getting familiar with wartime cooking. I didn't do it for writing my book. I just did it because I found it interesting and fun. And it turned into a really great resource and experience for writing my character. So I was just writing what I knew, and it made it really natural to pull from. And another thing that I did was I tried to hunt down original sources that were published when my book took place. And so I bought some wartime magazines and wartime cookbooks that I'd already been collecting for my ration recipe challenge. And I was able to use these for my book in writing. I did a lot of other research online that I could find from reputable sources. The National World War II Museum was a really great resource, among a lot of others. So this was just an ongoing thing. When I was writing my book, I was coming from a place of some knowledge of World War II, so I felt comfortable. But anytime I ran into something, I was like, oh, I don't know how they did this. Like when it came to the draft, the ages of the draft is a little confusing. And so I had to really dig to find information about exactly when the ages changed for the draft during the war. So just whenever I came up on something, I did research on it as much as I could. So a lot of it was like couch research, surfing the web and finding good resources that I could pull from. So that was a huge process of my book that I just, chipped away at over time. The third thing is I made use of beta readers and fact checkers. So I had maybe 5 or 6 people read my first draft, and they gave me feedback of what worked, what didn't make sense, some things that were missing, just whatever. And I was able to incorporate that into my second draft. And I'd say among my most valuable of beta readers was my friend Kim, who is half Korean, and her mom, who is Korean. they both read my book and gave me feedback. So they were able to fact check my Korean language, my Korean food, and even relationships. And that was hugely helpful. And I felt that was extremely important. I didn't feel like my book would be legitimate if I didn't take it to a Korean source to check. So that was extremely important to me, so that my book was accurate, as accurate as I could make it. The final thing that I did was I hired for the things I felt were important. So I hired an editor to go through my book for the final editing, and that was extremely valuable because they were able to catch a lot of the things that my beta readers did not. And I'm not a professional editor by any means. I mean, I've got a pretty good eye, but it's just good to have someone else look at it. I also hired somebody to do my cover, and I think it turned out really well. I purchased the photographs for the front and back from one of those sites that you can purchase photographs from, like Shutterstock, and then she had to change the hair color on the female because she was a brunette in the photograph, and I needed her to be blonde. So that was really tricky. But to me, it was worth it. Having the cover be high quality was really important to me. And the last thing was I bartered with a friend who's a photographer to take my author photos, because I really wanted to have some nice author photos that I could use, and not just something I snapped with my phone or my camera myself. So that's what I did. And then I published it through CreateSpace, which is a pretty nice service, and it goes through Amazon, and you can buy it in its print on demand through there, and which is really nice because then you don't have a ton of copies sitting around needing to be sold. So that's the process that I went through to write my book, and it took about a year. And even looking back, I feel like, wow, that went by really fast. Like, how did I write that in that amount of time? And I think the underlying thing that always comes back to me is that the story was really driving me. Nobody had published a book like about this topic before like this, and I wanted to be the one to write it. I felt it was an important story to tell. So the story drove me to really finish, and that was a huge motivation, even when some days were just really hard with some of the things that happen in the book. They're extremely difficult to write. And so that was just something I had to push through. And but that whole underlying drive was always there. So I think another important thing is to have really supportive friends, and or just someone that you can vent or bounce ideas off of. And I had that in my mom and my husband for the guy parts. and then my best friend Mari, and it was she was there through the whole thing, and I was able to just bounce ideas off of her. She read all of my rough drafts, I think every single version. I love you, Mari. And so yeah, so that was my process. Nothing really magical. It was just hard work and determination, and just chipping away at it day by day. I didn't have a deadline. I think that was good because I just wrote naturally that way. I'm right now trying to start the research for my next World War II historical fiction, and now that we have another baby in the house, things are not going as smoothly as before. And so I feel like I have to rediscover my process all over again. Yeah, it's hard. And there's so many, my research topics are huge. And they're a little bit easier to research than Korean Americans in the war, but still really tough because of how huge they are. And so we'll see how it goes. I've begun some of the writing, but I don't think it's going to take a year. I think it's going to take way longer this time. Woo! So day by day, that's what it is. Just chipping away day by day. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope something I said helps you in your writing ambitions. So thanks for watching. Talk to you later.